So welcome everyone. Just a quick check-in if um, everyone can hear me. It looks like we're having some sound issues, but how's the sound for folks out here? Okay, so overall it looks like our sound is okay. So if you're having some issues with the sound, um, you might want to exit the room and just try to re-enter and see if it's better following that. But without further ado, we'll get started. So I want to welcome everybody to today's session. So my name is Wendy Thenis, and I'm the program manager for ArtsFest Saskatchewan. And so it's my pleasure to welcome everyone here today. I'm situated on Treaty 4 territory here in southwestern Saskatchewan. I live in Shaunavon, and Treaty 4 is traditional homelands of the Cree, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, Dakota, Lakota, Nakota, and Métis nations. And our presenter today is Alyssa Berry, and Alyssa comes to us from Calgary, which is situated on Treaty 7 territory. So today's webinar is social media marketing and strategies and analytics. And so a very relevant topic that has suddenly become perhaps even more relevant in this pandemic that we're facing. And social media is something that if we haven't been using to this point or aren't that familiar with, it's something that we are all becoming more familiar with. And Alyssa is going to give us some great tips today about how to utilize social media. So Alyssa is the principal of Alyssa Berry Communications out of Calgary. She has 18 years of marketing, communications, and public relations experience in municipal government, recreation, culture, and tourism. In 2015, she launched her Alyssa Berry Communications, which is a boutique marketing and communications firm specializing in creating and implementing full-service strategies for clients in tourism and culture sectors. Alyssa has been a presenter of our webinars previously, so you might remember her if you tuned in back in March, I guess it was. Seems like a long time ago. And she's also one of our mentors that you're able to connect with for a one-on-one session. And so I would encourage you to do that. We're still encouraging all of our organizations to still reach out and complete their one-on-ones. Our mentors are willing and ready to help you, and this might be a time when they're needed the most, and are certainly willing to address some of the new challenges with you as well. So just a couple of logistics about our session today. Again, the chat box, chat window, I think you've all figured that out, and everybody's been greeting each other. So welcome to everyone from across the country. If you have a question for Alyssa, we will have time for Q&A after her presentation. And those I would ask that you type in the Q&A pod that you'll find along the bottom of your screen, rather than in the chat window. And at the end of our session, there'll be a poll that I will pull up for you to give some feedback on today's session. And even more importantly, once you exit our session today, a survey will pop up in your browser bar from FormStack. That's how we collect the surveys, and there will be a survey there that we really would like your feedback for that survey as well. So without further ado, I will turn things over to Alyssa, and we will get Alyssa and her presentation pulled up on the screen here. And Alyssa, just before you go further, we don't have your sound. I'm trying to turn that on for you here too. There we go. We should be set now. Sorry about that.
Perfect. Thank you, Wendy, and thank you to everybody who is on the line today. Thanks for taking time out of your day to come and learn a little bit about social media. And I won't get into too much about who I am because Wendy did a great intro, so appreciate that. But before I get started, I just want to let everybody know that this presentation is done from a sort of overview kind of 101 level. And with social media, I know a lot of people have different varying expertise in that area. So for anything that is sort of higher level or more specific, you can certainly ask those questions at the end. But this just gives a general overview about social media 101 and some strategies that people can take, especially going through this pandemic time. So we're going to start first of all. Oops, why is this not going over? With why you need a social media presence at all. And this is pretty basic, but I find that even a lot of arts organizations have very limited or low knowledge of why social media is even relevant. And the main reasons, obviously, is you need to have brand presence online. People need to know you exist. People need to know you're there. You need to create an authentic narrative and tell people what you do and establish your organization as an expert. Obviously, you're experts in what you do and the people that you support, and you need to be able to share that. And of course, not everybody lives right in your community, and not everyone can access your services directly. So you want to be able to tell the world, so to speak, what you do. And obviously, as you become more adept at your social media and your social media channels, you want to ensure that they're connected. And that's when we can talk about increasing your web traffic and ticket sales and all those sorts of things that are connected from a good social media strategy. But the basic gist is that if you aren't online, you're not in business. And I think we're seeing that quite considerably now during this pandemic, and you're seeing a lot of small businesses that weren't already online now trying to catch up and figure out how they can sell product online, or restaurants being able to do delivery service, and people are trying to adapt. And I think it's a lesson for everyone that unless you actually build your community always, being able to sort of create your community in the midst of a crisis is not really going to do much for you in the long run. And this is why consistency is the most important thing, and especially and even during this pandemic. So in talking about COVID a little bit, I've had some people say to me that they're going to take a break from social, or they don't know what to say, they don't know what sort of content to be putting out, and they feel that if they're not putting out COVID content, that they're sort of not then doing justice to the situation. And all of those things just aren't true. And if anything, right now, you should be even more so telling your story online. And there's two reasons for that. One is that the increase in content generation and content consumption right now is way up. People are at home. Even if you're working from home, your structure's changed, and so more people are being able to log on online and see what's going on, and they're logging onto their Instagram accounts and their Facebook accounts. And the timing's different too, whereas you might see an uptake later on in the evenings when people get home from work. You're seeing a more consistent flow of consumption throughout the time now. So, and the other reason is because people are looking for stories and content that is not crisis related. People want comfort now. They want to feel that someone's going to tell them it's okay, so to speak. So cultural organizations and arts organizations are actually in a really good position to be able to circumvent a lot of the negative or the sad or the frustrating content that's happening right now online, and you're able to actually produce and push out quality content that is about feeling good, feeling inspired, and all those sorts of things that the arts community does well anyway. So throughout this time, through this pandemic, it's really important to stay consistent in your presence online. First of all, it adds credibility to your organization and the fact that you're able to adapt, you're able to pivot. Let's all stop using the word pivot, really. But you're able to sort of change the way your program structure is set up, and you're visible, and you're still able to connect with your audience, because your audience is still there. You're just accessing them differently, and they want to see you. They want to see that you're okay. They want to hear your stories. They want you to also be authentic. They want you to be vulnerable. They want you to show how difficult it is to run an arts organization that's closed, and that will maybe be closed for this foreseeable future, and how that's different. And people want to know how they can help you, or what other things they can do. And all those conversations and all that takes place online, because that's where we have to live right now. And so if you're able to create that community and nurture that community through this process, you're going to come out better on the other side. Because surveys are starting to come out now in the fact of people being surveyed about businesses. I mean, this is more corporate than it is arts, but it's still relevant. And people are remembering what businesses did or didn't do during this time. And businesses that are showcasing their content and their online presence in terms of profit, that's going to be remembered, and people have no time for that right now. People want content, and people want businesses to show that they care. People want businesses to show that people matter more than profit, and those sentiments are going to extend well beyond this pandemic. And I'm not going to get into a ton of that, because it's not really the point of this presentation today, but just keep that in mind in terms of how you are going to roll out your current sort of crisis mode social media, and into the next phase of sort of transitioning, that people want people's stories. And if there's anything better than arts organizations to being able to provide that, I don't know what that is right now. So stay online, stay consistent. That's really what's going to get you through. And people really want to support organizations right now. So the more you allow them access, and the more that you allow them the opportunity to provide assistance, and or even just to know that things are continuing, and that you have a plan for how you're going to transition out of this, that's what people really want to know, and support you in as you move forward. But I'm sure there's going to be a lot of pandemic questions at the end. But just sort of getting into, I mean, this is sort of the 101 section in terms of sort of creating your social media strategy and how you kind of start. Because even if you already have channels and you already have presence online, these are good tips to know if you want to go back and start to restructure what this all looks like. This is sort of a good way to start that process. In setting the foundation, you kind of want to get a breadth of your brand story at the beginning. And if anybody was in my brand webinar earlier, this sort of gets into a lot of that in terms of your messaging, your taglines, your visuals, all those sorts of things, to ensure that all of those things are at your fingertips. They're all available. There's nothing worse than trying to create social media content and you're running around trying to find photos, or you're like trying to find stats, or you're trying to do all those sorts of things that we've all been in. But the more you can gather all of your pertinent information and put it in a Google Drive or put it in a shared folder that everyone has access to, they know where your logo files are, they know where your photography images are, and it's all accessible so that everybody can kind of be able to sort out and look at the breadth of what you have and how to create your content story around those things. And in terms of choosing your channels, this is an interesting take. And when I work with small businesses a lot, there's a feel that you have to be everywhere and all things to everyone. And that just isn't true. And especially from a small business or a small arts organization perspective, where you might have one person running social, or you might have volunteers doing it, go where your audience is. you don't have to be on every channel. It's unrealistic. It's not sustainable. And if all of your audience is on Facebook, then that's where you live. You don't need to worry about having Twitter channels and LinkedIn and any of those sorts of things. Focus on where your audience is and build that channel very well before you start thinking that you need to start like plastering the internet with your information. It's easier. It's easier to manage from a resource perspective, and it's where your audience already lives. So don't try to build an audience on Instagram if your audience is all already on Facebook and you already have an engaged group there. So that's just what I talk about in sort of creating and choosing your channels, is being specific and strategic about where you actually really need to be and where you don't need to be at the time being. So in terms of creating a strategy, there's a few steps and they're fairly straightforward, but I find that if you walk yourself through this process, it helps create a bit of a structure around what you want to be saying online and how you want to actually be pushing out content. So firstly, you need to define your organizational goals, because ultimately your online presence and your social media are just an extension of your organization and what it is that the goals of your organization. Is it to sell tickets? Is it to engage youth? Is it to generate sponsorships? Whatever those organizational goals, clearly define those, because those help then create what content you want to actually be pushing out to tell people. Second of all is standing out. And this seems pretty straightforward, but I find that a lot of arts organizations struggle with this in terms of being unique and being different and what sets your organization apart from others. Everyone's doing great work. This is kind of a struggle in the nonprofit sector generally, is that it's not that anybody's doing anything better or greater than anyone else. It's just that how are you doing it a little differently, or what makes your story unique? And this kind of goes back to a bit of the brand discussion too, in terms of your value proposition and what makes your organization sets you apart and makes you unique comparatively to your competitors or your partners, and using those elements to start to create your social strategy in terms of how you want to look, what your tone is online. Are you kind of fun and irreverent? Are you more sort of serious, or do you have more older audience that requires a little more sort of longer narrative online than as opposed to like short, quick kind of tips and tricks? Those are the kinds of things that you sort of have to look at in terms of how you want to stand out from everyone else in the big soup that is the internet. 3 is research, and this is researching your audience, like who they are, what they want, how they consume content online, what they're looking at. It's also researching your own competitors. Competitors, you can even put that in quotes if you want, but in your geographic landscape, like who are the other organizations? And it doesn't have to be strictly arts, because you're competing against multiple different sectors for the same audience and for the same people. What does that look like? Who are those people? Who are those businesses that are sort of infringing on your territory, so to speak? And because you'll find that a lot of your story and how you want to present yourself will come out of what it is that your audience is already consuming, and their patterns of consumption online will all come out of that. And I'm not talking you have to pay money for big market research and stuff. Just, do audience surveys about content and social media directly. Talk to leaders and like sort of the VIPs of your community, like who those people are, who the sort of the big voices of your community, the loudmouths, those kind of people. Talk to those people about what they're doing, or how you can integrate or separate yourself from that landscape as well. But just sort of be aware of what's going on in your direct community and those communities outside of that. 4 is integrating your social channels. And this means integrating your social channels to everything else in your organization. There is nothing worse that I see than social media channels that are run sort of independently of the organization itself. Like what the organization's values and their brand is not reflected in their social media at all. It's like a totally different universe. And that causes confusion and sort of a little bit of distrust in your audience in terms of what's really your messaging and what's real. Like, is it your social presence, or is it your website presence, or is it your your media presence? Like where should they exist in terms of deciding what your organization really is? So all of your channels and all of your communications mediums need to be integrated. That includes e-newsletters, your website, your social, your newspaper or your radio ads or whatever sort of advertising you're doing. All of those things need to be integrated with each other so that you're saying the same and you're presenting the same on all areas. And so that it's clear there's a cohesive message and there's a cohesive story across all mediums, and that no one's going to get confused as to who or what you do. Sorry, I have to keep moving around my screen because my laptop isn't big enough to see all my points. This sort of the translating your brand, this also sort of goes hand in hand with the integrating. So this obviously means ensuring that what you're saying online and what you're saying on social media is your brand. It's not something else. You're not trying to be something else online than you are, and that you're not trying to present your organization differently online than you would one-on-one or people coming to your shows or whatever it is. So that means that's hand in hand with being integrated across your channels. It's just basically meaning you're authentic on your social channels. And then the 6th thing is tracking and measuring. And we'll talk a little bit about this in a little bit, but it's really important to track what you're doing online and through your social media. There's free and easy ways to do it, which I'll touch on later. But if you're not measuring or tracking what you're doing or what the response is, then how do you actually know it's working or it's doing anything, especially if you're running a campaign that you're trying to convert into ticket sales, or you're doing some sort of, you want conversions in some way. If you're not tracking how it's going, then how do you adjust and make any changes? So we'll get to that in a moment. But this is more information. I'm not going to go through the whole thing here, but because you'll get this for reference at the end. But these are just some tips and tricks on the main channels in terms of when to post, how much to post, little tips and tricks on how to get better traction, those sorts of things. The biggest thing I can say on social media is be authentic. And I mentioned this before, but what you're saying or the sort of story that you want to tell, it's consistent and it's the same. So if you want examples like of places that do it really well or have good sort of online presence from an arts organization's perspective, locally from Calgary's perspective, the ballet does a really great job. Their social media is always very consistent and very, it has a very particular look about it that sort of is consistent throughout all their channels. But from your perspective, from a smaller arts organization, it's basically just ensuring that you've taken the time to figure out how you want to present your organization. And that means the look. So if you look through Instagram feeds, you'll find that really great organizations that have sort of figured it out will have a very specific look in their Instagram feed. All their photos sort of have the same aesthetic and the same color tones, those sorts of things. And and they're using their channels differently. That's the other sort of component in this too, in terms of tips and tricks, is that You can reuse content over your channels, but make sure it's different. Whether it's whether you might use a different visual on each channel, even if it's the same copy, or changing up the copy a little bit on each channel so it looks or it feels a little different. So, I mean, I'm all about repurposing content, which I could do a whole presentation on itself, but utilizing the content over all your channels, but that you're just not reposting. That's sort of the algorithms in social media really sort of look down on auto posting from other channels. So if you're just consistently auto posting your content from Instagram to Facebook, and especially because Facebook owns Instagram, Facebook will sort of not show your posts. They'll kind of punish you a little bit in the algorithm because it looks like you're a bot. That's kind of the gist. But anyway, in terms of the sort of posting and things like that, don't overpost. Once a day is more than enough if you want to post every day of the week. You can post 2 days a week, but don't be posting like 3, 4, 8 times a day. Twitter's a little different in terms of more posting on Twitter because the news feed flows so much faster than the other channels, and you won't actually catch previous posts on Twitter when you log in. So posting more on Twitter isn't really a bad thing. But quite honestly, I don't think most organizations need to have a great Twitter presence. Twitter's really good for breaking news and for creating conversations. Like, let's say there's a arts chat hashtag that you want to follow. Like every Tuesday they have an arts chat or something, and you can kind of go in and create conversation around that. But generally, because Twitter's kind of a B2B model, business to business model, it's not essential to have a great Twitter presence. I would certainly more focus your efforts on Facebook and Instagram. But anyway, as I said, I'm not going to go through all of these because you'll get this as reference at the end. A lot of you online already might know the different types of content, but I just did want to briefly go over this for those that are kind of just getting started. But if you've heard the term evergreen content, or if you see somebody sarcastically on Twitter say, oh, that's an evergreen tweet, that basically means that could have been posted anytime, anywhere, about anything. It's basically timeless in terms of the content that's within it. So that's things like if you wanted to post, like when you're filling in your content calendar, which we'll get to in a second, these are the types of posts that you can use at any time, and you can reuse at any time because they're not time specific, and they don't sort of relate anything to they don't relate to anything that's going on in the moment. So things about, like, they can be history of your organization, or you can always put in posts about board members or new board members, or things like that, things that you can utilize to fill in your content, like to make it more robust, that you can reuse over and over, but because it isn't time sensitive. And then all the alternate content just means all of those pieces that you can fill in between your evergreen content, which would be things like posts about upcoming shows, or buying tickets, or this musician's coming into town, all those sorts of things that are a little more time sensitive, that you fill in between those sort of general anytime posts. And hero content is your big stuff. So if you've been working on a video, or you've been working on a photo shoot, or you have some sort of big news or big announcement like launch events, all those sorts of things would fall into that hero content. Anything that's taken you a long time and resources in behind the scenes to get out to the public, that's would be your hero content. That would happen like once in a blue moon, like once or twice a year if you're doing your fall launch and a spring launch or something like that. And that kind of content is what you could build a campaign around. Like if you wanted to boost posts, or you wanted to create a Facebook ad campaign around that, that's the kind of content that you would use, because it's dazzling, so to speak, kind of the like all the sorts of high impact visuals, high impact content that you want a vast amount of people to see because it's taken you so long to put together. So those are kind of the general themes around content. You're really going to be mostly live in the evergreen and the alternative content for the most part as you build out a content calendar. Now, in creating content, this is kind of where we get into the nitty-gritty of how and what to put together to create interesting content and content that gets you great engagement. The first thing is that you're going to create content buckets. And these are the buckets are basically themes or topics, like on a sort of umbrella scale that you want your organization to be focused on. So for example, I worked with a food tour company, and she had four content buckets. One was about tours, like obviously she's a tour company. The second was about all their partners, all the restaurants and all the farmers and everybody who's attached to the organization that they use for their tour stops. One was about, one of their buckets was about the communities that they're in. So the locations that they have their tours in. So for example, they did tours in Banff. So there'd be a content bucket around Banff in terms of the history of Banff, or sort of the tourism of Banff, all those sorts of things that you could focus on in the community. And then the fourth one was about news and events around the organization itself. So we like blogs and new tours, or the president's at getting a Travel Alberta award. Those sorts of things would be more organizational specific. So looking in terms of an arts organization or your organization directly, you can create buckets, those big theme buckets around content that you want to be pushing out regularly throughout the year. So one could be about shows, one could be about your artists or your staff, kind of community news or organizational news. I wouldn't do more than 4 different types of content buckets, but if you start to figure out your big themes of what you want to be focusing on, then it helps to create content within those themes. This next one, I touched on this a little bit earlier, but organizing your assets, like where is everything? Making sure it's in one place that everybody has access to. No one's trying to find that photo of the dancer from 10 years ago or any of that sort of stuff. Make sure that take the time, and now's a good time to do these sorts of things because you're not in the midst of performance season, those sorts of things. So you have the time to sort of go through, pull all your photos that are in multiple different places in your different folders in your organization, and dump them into and categorize them into one area so that you can see what videos you have, what photos you have, what like old blog posts you might have had, anything like that that would be relevant in helping you create your content calendar, and making sure it's accessible to everyone is a huge win. And I mentioned this before too in terms of repurposing content. So one blog post, like if you're writing a regular blog or you're writing an e-newsletter, anything like that, that can be repurposed into multiple different posts. Like a blog post could get you probably 5 different social media posts. It can then be used in an e-newsletter. It can be then used on your website as a web update, anything like that. Like figure out ways that you can take one piece of content and utilize it in multiple ways. Number one, it's so much more effective because you're not having to reinvent the wheel anytime you're going to Facebook to write a post about something. Number two, it's so much more resource effective because if you have one person that can write a longer form piece of content that then can be used multiply, that's a huge win just resource wise, because then you're not having to be running around trying to figure out what you're going to write about in multiple different ways. And I would also put all that repurposed content in the same folder in the same area that all your other assets are in. And I'll show you why in a second, why that's so much more effective. So if you have a folder that's like social media content or even content creation that lives in your shared drive, and in it there's photo library, there's blog posts, there's your social media calendar, all those things are accessible, then it's so much easier to go in and find an old blog post that you want to repurpose into social media posts. And then developing a content calendar, which we will discuss in 10 seconds. And then this is sort of the theme of today, is just staying focused, staying committed, and staying consistent. That is the key to any sort of key strategy on social media, is being consistent. Don't post and then no one hears from you for a month. There's nothing worse than going on organizations' social media channels and they haven't posted in months or years, I've found. If you can't be consistent and you can't make the commitment to keep your channels updated, then don't have them. Like, just close them and have them move off. And then you focus on one, like I said before, because there's nothing that looks worse than it looks like your channel's just dead. Okay, so this is a content calendar. And I'll kind of walk you through how I do this. This is my content calendar for my business. I've just taken an example from January. I do these as Google Sheets, but you can use Excel or whatever sort of spreadsheet program you want. But what I do and how I've set this up is I'll create the entire month. So this obviously is just a snapshot, but you'll have the dates from January 1st to January 31st. And you have your theme in your campaign, which is what those content buckets that I talked about earlier. That's where you're going to have you're going to break out your content buckets so that you're representing them consistently, so that if you're doing shows, news, whatever, you'll see that you can create a post for each of those, so you're consistently working through your buckets. So from the theme campaign, I have like drive to website, and I have a knowledge and sort of PR hacks posts that I do. So I use those as my particular content buckets. Now I just use, for my business, I use Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Those are my areas. I don't use Twitter for my business much. And ideally, and I've gotten better at this. You can see this is January, but I do post different things on Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook. But right here, it just sort of gives you an example of the posts. So you're going to actually write your posts for the month all in one fell swoop. So you're going to bucket your Facebook, your Instagram, your Twitter, your whatever content you're going to have. You're going to put those into your columns, and you're going to create the content for the month at one time. So the reason being is you're going to take 1 to 2 hours. This is usually what it takes me to do mine. Depends on for other clients. When I do this for clients, it can take more or less depending on how long it takes me to pull assets and stuff, but give or take 1 to 2 hours every month to sit down and do your full month's content calendar. But then it's done for the month. And then all you're basically going to do is you're going to copy those posts into the appropriate channels to which they go to. And everything has a purpose. So if you'll see on the right-hand side, what's the call to action? Every post that you place on social should have an ask. Like, what do you want people to do? Do you want people to go to your website? Do you want people to review this blog? Do you want people to check out this YouTube channel? Like, whatever it is, you're asking someone to do something. You want a call to action. And so ensuring that is clearly stated for each post will help you then learn whether it's really worth posting or not. Because I find that people will post all kinds of things that are really relevant to their brand or what it is that they want to be saying, but they're sort of just running around and they're posting stuff. But if there's no direct correlation to anything back to your business, then it's not worth posting. So this just gives you an idea. You can lay this out any way you want to. This is just what I found works, and I use this same format for clients because it gives you all your hashtags. And I will say looking up appropriate hashtags for what you should be posting is an important component to this, because hashtags are basically conversations that people follow online. So if you want to be a part of that conversation and have your posts seen, then making sure that you're using the appropriate hashtags for those posts is important. So that kind of gives you an idea of how to lay this out on a month-to-month basis. Now, when you get into a crisis situation, like we're in now, you might have had your whole month of March, or April, let's say April, you might have had your whole month of April's content calendar already created. Now it's like, oh God, what do we do now? Because this has all happened. Well, it makes your life so much easier, because probably 70% of the posts and the content that you've already aggregated or put forward that you were going to do in the next month is still relevant. You just are going to have to change a few things. So instead of having to then like rethink your entire month's worth of social media, you might have to change like 25 to 30% of your posts to be like we're closed or something more timely specific. But that's a whole lot easier than trying to come up with a month's worth of communications surrounding a crisis. So looking at this from a ease of use and resource management purpose, it's so much easier for everybody if you're looking and planning a month out. Now, don't be planning your June content in January. It's a waste of time. But the week prior, so right now, for example, you should be planning all your May content. So you should sit down for the 1 or 2 hours on a day and plan out your May content. Now, I only post to my social channels like twice, maybe 3 times a week. So you'll see that not every date in here is filled in. So unless you're going to be posting weekly, daily, you can pick the days that you actually want to have your posts be live, and then they're already ready to go. So that's a good tip. So in terms of analytics, we're sort of getting to the end here, because I know a lot of people, when I talked about analytics or tracking and measurement, get panicked because they think they require like Sprout Social or Buffer or any of those paid software programs that are both schedulers and analytics programs. But you don't need those. And especially from an arts organization's perspective, they're not a good investment. Those sorts of programs are really great if you're doing a lot of posting, or if you're an agency that requires scheduling help because you're working for multiple different clients. But every channel has their own analytics within them. So Facebook has its own analytics. So if you have a business channel, you can go in and look in your back end of your Facebook page, and it'll have insights. And you can see your engagement rates and your followers and what posts were the most successful or not successful. And you can see all of that on a monthly basis. Instagram is the same. You can go into your Instagram channel and see the insights in terms of how your posts were, how many people saw them, your reach, all of those sorts of things. So if you're even able to do that and get a consistent analytics setup, which I will show you my example next, that's a huge win, because then you can actually start to baseline your channels and how they're growing and your engagement. And that's a key point too, is focus on engagement rates, not your follower count. Because followers, if you have 10,000 followers, but you only get like 5 likes or 2 comments on your post, then 10,000 followers isn't really relevant. What you want to be looking at is you want to be producing content that is creating engagement, which is likes and comments and conversations around your posts. So how many followers you have is fairly irrelevant in that, because I've seen great small channels, like less than 1,000 followers, that have excellent engagement rates because they have a very engaged community that supports them. And that's where you want to get to. And in the reporting, keep it simple. And this is what I'm going to show you in terms of keeping it simple. So if you have a board that you have to report to, or you have sponsors that you need to report to in terms of the success of a campaign, this is a very simple report that I do. And I only show basic information on 3-month intervals. And instead of pulling information out of a software program that then you have to basically analyze, this is all taken directly from the channels themselves. And this is the basic overview information I provide any client on a monthly basis, or that I will provide a board so that they can, in their board package, they can see how the social media is going, or if you have sponsors who want to know how your channels, the success of your channels, if you had a partnership with them on some campaigns. And in this, you'll see that it's all the social channels that the organization, this was for a client, that's why you can't see who it's for, but it was for a client, but all their social channels that they use, which are Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, are included here, along with their MailChimp account, which is their e-newsletter, whether you use MailChimp or Constant Contact or any of those, and then their website stats. So this is all together in one easy accessible place that if anybody wants to know how your online and your online communication channels are growing, this is an easy and an effective way to set that up. And then it's only showing 3 months at a time. So for example, once February comes around, then January would go to the top, and it would be January, December, February. You know what I mean? Like they rotate over. So you're only showing the last month, the current month, and the next month, or at the same time. Anyway, this just gives an idea of how you can measure. So if you're able to show, like obviously, for example, this client's Twitter feed grew a lot since in the 2 months that we took over. And you can, so if you're having to sort of justify the success or the powerfulness of social media, being able to keep track and consistently show the growth or the reach or impressions over a period of time is a great way to show your prowess in what it is that you do. So again, this will be provided as resource in the PDF that Wendy sends everybody. So you'll be able to take these as an example and create one for yourself in a way that works best for your organization. But that is it for today. So I'm happy to answer questions and any comments that you may have.
That was amazing, Alyssa. Thank you so much. I am not a social media guru by any stretch, and I've learned so much today myself. And you've put it in such easy to understand terms and laid that all out so very well for us. So thank you. I know, the first question I might have asked would have been, do we have to use all the different platforms that are out there? And that's the very first thing you addressed. And so appreciate that. It doesn't seem so overwhelming.
Yes.
Pick what works best. So just a reminder that we will take questions now, and type those into the Q&A box that you see along the bottom of your screen rather than in the chat. So some folks are typing in the chat there. If you can just transfer those questions over to the Q&A, that will make things much easier for us. I'm going to just pull up a quick poll about how you felt about today's webinar, and I'll leave that up there for you. And Alyssa's contact information is on there, and that'll be part of the PDF that I send to you later. And she is, once again, also one of our mentors, so you can connect with her for a one-on-one if you wish to. So I will pull up our questions now, Alyssa.
Okay.
So Cody asks, how do we create calls to action for our evergreen content posts?
For evergreen content, most I would do for calls to action is usually pushing back to your website. That's usually the easiest and the most effective thing to do, because obviously you want people to be driven to your website in some capacity. And for the most part, your website pages or your website content isn't going to change that excessively that that the link wouldn't still be relevant or the 3 months down the road.
Great. Do you know where we can find a decent free social media content calendar template? You've shown a couple of yours there. Is there some other templates out there, or should we just be using Excel or some spreadsheet to create something?
You can Google, if you Google content calendars, you'll find a ton of options. And then you can find one that the style that you like. You can find one that is has sort of the feel you want, or yeah, just use your own Excel spreadsheet. They're easy to set up. But yeah, Google has tons of options.
Michelle asks, what are examples of call to action other than see our website, buy a ticket, donate? She feels like their call to action is always asking for money.
I would say if you're writing content, directing people to a blog post, or even articles that are that you didn't produce but are websites of other people that you're using for sort of industry to be shown as sort of an industry expert. So if there was interesting TV or like TV video, or there was an interesting article written in a magazine or a paper that reflects the organization or that has some sort of relevance, those are always good things. If your board member or your president has like written an op-ed or been in something, obviously linking to those sorts of things. I'm really big on also highlighting sponsors. So if you have sponsor partnership agreements, those kinds of things, you can either link directly to, if you have a sponsor page on your own website, or even directing to their website. Community investment pages, most of them usually have community investment pages that you can link to. But there's different ways to do things too. Like you always don't have to just say donate now or those kind of things. You can create your content around the story, but you don't just have to be like, oh, donate here. You can think of different ways to integrate those links within the copy of your post.
Great.
Oh God, there's only 2 questions. We're going to be here forever. Okay.
There's a few. I think some of them might be sort of repeats from one to another. Do you recommend boosting posts for maximum engagement?
I find boosting works. Again, if you're boosting posts that are more interesting, sort of larger based content. Boosting posts, I like better than boosting events. If you have events that are on your list on your Facebook page, don't bother boosting them. They're a waste of money. I don't know why Facebook doesn't like boosted events, but don't do that. But certainly boosted posts work really well. If you create your audience, you do a really great job of drilling down your Facebook, because for those that don't know, when you're creating an audience profile in the back end of your Facebook page, if you're doing a boosted post or an ad campaign, you can get like super detailed. Like it's kind of creepy how far you can drill down into your audience or the people you want to target with the ad. So if you want to boost a post, make sure that the audience grouping, whether it's geographic or psychographic or whatever sort of pieces that you've made for the people that you want to see the ad or the boosted post, is large enough that you're not going to be charged an arm and a leg. If you're too niche and Facebook, and it's not a large enough audience, Facebook will probably tell you that when you try to boost the post. But make sure that if you're boosting the post, that it's information that a large audience would want to actually want to know about, so that it's better worth your money.
And then how about boosting versus buying ads on Facebook?
Different. It depends on, boosting a post, it's more of a flat rate of pay. So you just sort of give Facebook a a rate that you pay per day. So if you want, like, if you only want to pay $5 a day, and then it maxes out at like $100 for the length of time of the boost, then you know exactly what you're going to be paying. Whether if you're doing ads or you're creating an advertisement on Facebook, they're cost per clicks. So you'll pay more if more people are clicking on your ad, which is a good thing. Obviously, you want people to click through. So it's just a matter, it's more budgetary than it is anything, because you're not going to have a specific daily dollar value in an ad, because you're going to be charged on a per click basis. So as long as you have a basic budget in mind, that you don't want to go over for either one of them, they're both valuable.
Thank you. Darcy Lynn asks what your thoughts are about demographics and which platform to use. Is there a certain demographic?
Yeah, I mean, obviously Facebook skews older. So if you do have an older demographic, that definitely is probably the place to be. Sort of I mean, if you're a super young audience, you might want to look at things like TikTok or Snapchat. Those sorts of things would definitely be where those youth would live. Or if you're trying to target youth for a specific reason, like youth meaning like under 25, most 18 to 24-year-olds are on Snapchat and TikTok. But generally, sort of the old staid Instagram now, it seems to be the place that most people live, no matter your demographic, because younger people still use Instagram, and older people, I guess, like us, still use Instagram. So that's kind of a good way to sort of get all of those people under an umbrella. But certainly, if your audience skews over 40, Facebook's always usually the best bet.
I can vouch for that.
Yeah.
But if you want my 16-year-old, it's TikTok.
Yes.
Paula says, I struggle with having a consistent Instagram presence because of a lack of direct post scheduling like I have on Facebook. Do you have a suggestion for scheduling platforms for Instagram?
Yeah, you can. I mean, if you want to start scheduling Instagram, you can use any of those paid software programs that I talked about before, like a Buffer or a Later or Hootsuite, or any of those all have free trials. So if you want to go on and like try them for 30 days and see how you like them to post to Instagram. I personally use Later to post to Instagram. I like the interface, but Planoly is really good for posting to Instagram. But you can use their free versions for an extended period of time to test out if you like it. But that's really the only way you're going to sort of be able to pre-schedule to Instagram is by using a scheduler. Because it doesn't have a scheduler within the channel itself like Facebook does.
And I see that Alana just gave us a little tip that you can schedule on Instagram now through Facebook in their Creator Studio.
Yeah, if you have a business account through Creator, you can. I don't know how many people have that here, but that's also a good tip. Yeah, you can do that.
Rocio asks, for small organizations with a small working board, how do you suggest we create a social media strategy when resources rely on our boards working on this?
If you have a board that's volunteer and responsible for taking care of social media, what I would do is allocate a board member as sort of the social media committee chairperson. It really helps to have one person that is in charge of creating the strategy and the creation model, whether it's content calendar or any of those sorts of things. So depending on the makeup of your board, I would probably try to recruit someone that could fill that. Or if you have someone on your board that's already sort of adept at social, just generally, I would utilize that person. And I would make that person responsible for creating the strategy and the monthly content calendar. And what you can do in that instance is every month at the end of the week of the last week of the month, send an email to the board, if it is a working board and it's the board, and have them provide insight or directives on what they think should be highlighted for the next month, so that everybody sort of has input. But ultimately, the decision making and the creation needs to come down to a person or two people. But too many hands in the pot is nothing will ever get done. So make sure that having someone who takes responsibility of that and ensures that the board is informed and has the opportunity for input. But realistically, someone needs to take that as a portfolio on a board.
And a great place to start is share this recording with whoever's going to be doing it too. Shanae asks, social media is super visually driven. How do you find visuals which work for your posts? Do you use visuals for every post?
Yes, you should use visuals for every post. Try not to post anything that doesn't have a visual attached. There's various different places you can find images, free images. Pexels is a place that I go, P-E-X-E-L-S. You can get tons of free, like royalty-free images there. If you have an Adobe account, Adobe, you can access stock images through Adobe. And if you have a Canva Pro account, so a lot of people use Canva to help create their social media graphics or anything. Now, a lot of people use Canva. And you can access a lot of things free on Canva. But if you have a Pro account, all images you have access to the entire image library on Canva through your Pro account that you can use for all of your posts as well. But that's sort of the best places to find royalty-free images or images that you can curate for your feeds. Because I know arts organizations always struggle with having a lot of great photography at their disposal. But if you even have like 5 to 10 hero images that your organization uses for its campaigns and even like for its advertising and stuff, and maybe even they were taken 5-8 years ago, it doesn't really matter. You can reuse photos. Like, don't reuse the photos like twice in a week or something, but you can post the same photo like 3 months later. No one's gonna know. Like, it's all smoke and mirrors, people. So don't think you have to have like thousands of images at your disposal. You can certainly cycle through like 15, 20. And if you access those places for free images, you'll be able to find tons of other images that you can pull in to help create or make a bigger breadth of assets for your posts.
Perfect. Lots of tips. Pablo asks, do you include return on investment dollar value from social media posts on your reports? And
No.
if so, how do you calculate? No.
No, mainly because, well, would you put a ROI on like an e-newsletter or anything like that either? Like, I think social media kind of gets a bad rap in the fact of people like, oh, what are we spending money on? But like, what are you spending money on in a Calgary Herald ad either? Like, it's all relative. Like, you have a budget that is set for marketing. Well, I hope that you all do in whatever capacity or whatever, however even small it is. But those marketing dollars are allocated how you see fit. So you can, like, for example, if you were running a specific campaign, so say you were running a campaign for like a contest or something like that, where you were giving away like tickets or something like that, you could certainly show based on the campaign. Like, if you set up, this is where it gets technical, but if you were able to set up a pixel on your website and you were directing people to that page on your website, you can track how many people came directly to your website from that Facebook post or ad or whatever. So you can certainly track all of that, and usually you can track all that through your Google Analytics, which is the back end analytics of your website. So yeah, you can certainly show the increase in traffic. Now, you probably could work out math wise, like if you invested $100 into or $250 into a Facebook campaign, and you could extrapolate from the amount of people that went to the website, because you can track them based on the pixel that's installed on your page. You could actually figure out the conversion. So you could actually figure out how many people actually bought a ticket off of it. It would just be a little bit of a puzzle, but yeah, you can do that. I wouldn't normally show that. Like, I wouldn't include that in a report to a board member or anything like that. But for your reference, or if you were doing something specific where you could say like, oh, we sold like 25 tickets based on this ad, that's a good thing for you to know.
Perfect. Thanks. Paula is wondering if what is considered a good engagement rate on social media? How do I compare my results to the industry standard?
Engagement rate is, I would say, if you're getting like probably, depends on what you're currently at. So let's use it more as a growth potential. So what I normally say to people, so if you're getting if you're getting 5%, like between 3 to 6% engagement, your goal should be to get 12 to 15. So whatever you're currently at, have a goal to get more than that. It's hard to say what's sort of average, because that really depends on the current number of followers that you already have and what you're already getting. So you can't really compare yourself apples to apples against a direct other channel, even if it's an arts organization. So I would focus more on what you're doing and figure out what your current engagement percentage is, and have the goal to increase that by like 5 to 8% in the first year, and 10%. That's what you should be looking at, is like, if you can increase your engagement rate even 10% over a year, that's pretty good.
Sounds good. We've talked about demographics in choosing which channels to focus on. Any other factors other than demographics?
Well, I think it comes back to that research piece in figuring out where your audience lives. So, and that what was I going to say there? That means you have to actually talk to them. Like, where do a survey with your audience, whether it's season ticket holders or whoever you allocate your audience resources. Survey those people specifically in regards to communications tools, and you can word it in such a way that you're looking at how you're talking to your audiences, and here's the ways that we currently do it, and tell us like where you currently get our information and all that kind of stuff, and utilize that information first, because the people who are already engaged with you, if you think that they're on Facebook but they're telling you that they're actually on Instagram, then you can make adjustments there, as opposed to sort of looking at it from a bigger landscape piece. But you can also look at it based on your current channels, like where are you getting the most engagement and the most community interaction now, and focus on that channel and making that channel grow. You can sort of even, like, if you're trying to like play in the big sandbox and you've got like 4 or 5 different channels, but if you actually analyze your engagement rates currently, you can sort of determine right then where your best opportunity is to invest more time and energy into what channel.
Thank you. Rhonda asks, if your exhibition venue is closed until the fall, how much of a social media presence would you strive for, weekly or bi-weekly? Or, so this is kind of referring to the pandemic. What should our presence be during this time?
I would certainly try to be visible at least a couple times a week. Like if you could factor in like Monday, Wednesdays, or Tuesday, Fridays, or I don't know, figure out your days of the week. But if you could at least be trying to, I mean, even if you could do once a week, if that's what you can strive for at this time, do that. Just be consistent in that. If you're going to do once a week, make sure that you are consistent in once a week and figure out what those posts are going to be about, but certainly still be visible. So if once a week is all you can manage resource wise, then do that. But if you can get to 2 days a week, that would be really great from a consistency perspective.
And we have a couple of people asking the question. We've Monica, and there's another one too further down our list here. I've seen theories that certain times of day are more effective for post visibility. Is that something you've noticed or agree with?
Yeah, that's definitely true, but it's all trial and error of what works for your posts, because there's sort of a general rule of thumb in terms of sort of activity, or the sort of the cycle of content consumption, but that doesn't, the rule of thumb doesn't always work for every individual business. So trial and error is sort of what I tell people to do from their own perspective. So post things at different times of day for your own channels and see what gets the best pickup. And then you can sort of extrapolate from that when your audience is online and consuming. But there are general rules of thumb. Like I find that the like 7 to 10 p.m. it seems to be a big time for a lot of people to be online. Kind of first thing in the morning as people check their channels before going off to work, that sort of stuff. But because you have the opportunity to, because of how social is set up, you can easily change times of day when you're posting and just see what works best.
Great. Natalie asks, is it best to have one person managing social channels, taking care of the calendar and content, etc.? Should that person be in your organization, or is outsourcing best?
Yes, it should. You should have one person that at least oversees it and is responsible for the section, or sort of as a social media person. It doesn't have to be somebody in your organization. You can certainly outsource that. There's lots of social media consultants out there that can manage those channels for you. It's all budget related. So obviously, ideally, you'd like somebody internally to be managing that, that's already being paid by your organization, instead of having to hire somebody to do that. But it depends on your organization, but it certainly doesn't need to be somebody internally, but it definitely should be a person's responsibility.
I know, just to add to that, I'm on a all volunteer run board, and we're mostly Gen X or baby boomers, and we did outsource that and felt it was important enough to have somebody that knew what they were doing and to look after that for us on a regular basis. And of course, we have to still feed them the information that we need to get out there, but it does seem to help us out a little bit.
Yeah.
Alyssa, you mentioned that we should not post the same content on all the platforms or just simply repost, but what if we do it manually on each platform separately? Is this also going to be not shown by the algorithms? That's from Marquetta.
Better. So if you're at the point, like if you've created your content and manually post it, that's fine. Ideally, you'd like the post to be a little different on each channel, but even if you're still posting the same, but you're manually doing it and not just auto posting, that makes a huge difference.
Lana asks, how do you handle when you're trying to maintain standard business hours to not burn out your staff, and you want people to contact you via email, but they message you on Instagram or Facebook outside of business hours? Any thoughts on that? How to?
Are they, okay, so there's 2 rules of thumb here. You're an arts organization or you're a nonprofit organization that is not curing cancer. So nothing's urgent. I'm just going to put that out there right off the bat. So unless your building's burning down, no one needs to contact you 24/7. That's just how it is. So what I tell people to do, even on outgoing messages, things like that, is if you see that you're getting a ton of direct messages through Instagram or a ton of messages through Facebook, you can auto, I know on Facebook you can do this, you can create an auto response being like, we will get back to you at 8:30 in the morning or blah, whatever. And you can also put stipulations around, like, even if you're answering a DM, you can be like, thanks for sending us a message. We'll get back to you during regular business hours. Under no circumstance are businesses, especially nonprofits, expected to be online 24/7, and that there's no expectation that that you have to answer or be available for these direct messages. Auto responses are good, or even just a holding. Like if you see them come through, you can just be like, thanks for, yeah, we'll get to it in the morning. That's more than fair. But just be cognizant that if people are messaging you, you can't let those sit there. Like it's basically like they've taken the effort. So just understand that too. There's nothing worse than messaging a business and you never hear from them. But there's no expectation that you should be responding to messages at 8 or 9 o'clock at night.
Yeah, great advice. I think a couple of these have been addressed. So I'm just going to kind of shout out to Alana. If you have other questions about boosting, just, type that in again, but I think we addressed that. And Rayanne, as well, I think your question was addressed, but if not, feel free to just type in again as we make our way down this very long list. Thanks, Alyssa. Do you need to go, or can we answer a few more? How's your time?
No, yeah, absolutely can answer a few more.
Okay. Patricia says, I noticed LinkedIn was absent entirely in your presentation. Any reason why?
Because most arts organizations or most organizations don't need to set up a LinkedIn page. LinkedIn is great for your personal, professional relationships. If you do have an arts organization page, that's awesome. But the content is totally different on LinkedIn than what you're posting on sort of commercial, consumer-based social media. So LinkedIn is really important from your own professional networking opportunities. And I share information on LinkedIn through my personal professional account on LinkedIn. But from a business perspective, it's one extra channel to manage that realistically, unless you're a direct B2B organization that's selling business to business, it's not necessarily relevant to have that set up. But I certainly encourage all of you to utilize your own LinkedIn accounts for pushing out relevant sort of industry news. But I don't talk about LinkedIn from a consumer perspective. I only talk about LinkedIn if I'm doing specific business to business directed campaigns. It's also hugely expensive. If anybody's tried to advertise on LinkedIn, it's very expensive.
Good to know. And Patricia is just wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit more about how to integrate Facebook page, website, as an example.
Yeah, so basically what that means is ensuring that your social media channels don't exist independently of your greater communications tools. So if you have a website that has specific typography and imagery and sort of a style that you project, and that goes to, like, if you have program books or advertisements, all those sorts of things have a very specific look and feel to your organization. Your social channels should reflect that. So that means utilizing the same stylistic components of imagery, using the same style of copy, like sort of the tone and how you present yourself online is reflected there. So if you have a very sort of corporate or very traditional type of language that you use on websites and through your emails, things like that, then don't have a completely like fun and irreverent, funky style on your social media channels, because those things don't connect. Just ensuring that what you're saying and doing on your channels is what you're saying and doing on your other communications pieces.
Okay. And that sort of answers, I think, Crystal's question. Do you recommend using a consistent look in your posts, such as font, background, sparse or
Yeah.
full visual? Yeah.
Yeah.
Natalie asks, blog posts are great, but take time and skill to develop well. Who is best to create something like that? That could be something that we send people to.
Yeah, I mean, obviously not everyone's going to have, and you don't need to have hundreds of blog posts archived on your website either. But if you have like writing blog posts, I mean, I don't know how many of you have a junior comms person that works for you, but that would fall under their purview in terms of creating and finding content that would be relevant to write blogs. Or if you have summer students or interns, any of those kind of people can certainly put together and write blogs. That's another area that you could contract out if required in terms of hiring a content creator to write several blogs for you at a time that you can have on your website. But realistically, anyone that can write a letter should be able to write a blog. So if you have an admin assistant or anything like that, anybody that sort of is your current person that writes and distributes communications materials would be a person that would oversee writing blogs.
Pablo has another question. When we pitch to potential sponsors, we try to give them a dollar value or price for each post on social media as part of the benefits they're getting. Any suggestions on how to measure or value those?
That's interesting. I've never seen that done. I've never seen that done where they've broken it out on a per post basis. Normally sponsorship, I've just seen sponsorship agreements on a sort of overall value. But if you were going to do if you were going to do a value on a per post basis, I probably would look at your current followers. So if you had less than 1,000 followers, or let's say even less than 5,000 followers, and you're getting let's say 3 to 6% engagement currently on your channels. I mean, I'm just going to throw something out. I have no idea what you'd value. Quite honestly, I mean, I don't know, like a couple $100. You know who would be a good person to answer these questions if you were going to do anything like this are influencers, because they know exactly how much they charge per post. Like if you're working with an influencer on a campaign, they will have a media kit that they will tell you that well, to work with me, it's like $200 a post and you get this, this, and this. That would be a better bet. I've never actually broken it out. I've never worked in that, but I can certainly find out, or I can certainly ask someone what would be sort of a rate generally. And I could get back to Wendy about that, but I don't really know that answer off the top of my head.
Yeah, I'll just add that it is something that's just been brought up, recently as we've been out meeting with our ArtsFest participants, and where some organizations are just sort of starting to attach values to that, because that's a really valuable part of a sponsorship package, the social media tags and posts. So it's something that we can explore further and maybe put out a piece for everybody about that.
Yeah,
so.
I think it's a good bit of information.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thanks for that question. Doris has a question. What do you think about donation campaigns via Facebook? Being registered, donation campaigns via Facebook.
Oh, like the thing like that people do for their birthdays and stuff, where they'll like create a campaign where you can donate to them.
Yeah, I'm
I would
not sure. She also mentions like being registered in the Facebook nonprofit category.
like, yeah, I mean, I haven't seen it set up, but yeah, that's an interesting point too, in terms of actually being set up as a registered component on Facebook. I have seen successful Facebook campaigns where, like if you're connected to, what's the site that Canada Gives? I've seen successful Facebook campaigns through Facebook where the giving is through Canada Gives to your organization, because you can set it up as a basic third-party site. I've seen success with that because you can create a campaign, a campaign around a narrative to donate to your organization through that. I personally haven't worked on one that would be specifically Facebook directed, but that's another interesting bit of information. But yes, you can successfully do donation campaigns through Facebook, whether it's through to your own website portal or through to Canada Gives kind of thing.
Sorry. Rayanne asks, do you recommend posting information about your festival to an event page if you've created one, or should you do it on your main Facebook page?
You can still, I would still post your events to Facebook. Those are still valuable because you can still share them. It's easy for people to share those event listing or the event listings on your page. And it gives you an idea of sort of the reach of those, because if people click that they're attending or thinking about it or that kind of stuff, it kind of leads to a bit of cachet around your event if you're getting a lot of pickup with people saying they're attending. Because I mean, there's pros and cons to that too, because just like everyone, I probably have a bazillion event requests that come through to me on my Facebook. I can't keep track of them all. Because if like anybody that has an event that's connected to me, I get sent to it. I get sent it in Facebook, but definitely still fill out and do event posts because they're just super easy to share.
Perfect.
And encourage your followers to share them. That's always a big thing too, is that like when you're doing your event posts and you've created them, post them and encourage your followers to share them.
Great. So further to that question, Rayanne asks, if you have an artist coming for a festival, would you announce it on the event page and the main page? Or
Yes.
just
Oh yeah.
okay.
Yeah, you would want to do, because you'd want to do consistent postings around that person coming. Like you just wouldn't post that once. You'd want to sort of do like an announcement that they're coming and do some posts around them being in the community and what they're doing, like all those sorts of things. You'd want to create a bit of a campaign around that person coming, and you'd want to be posting that to the main Facebook page.
And just a couple more, Alyssa, we're almost there. How do you know what a good rate is for hiring someone to manage your social media?
There's lots of options there. I have no idea. It depends on where you are. Like obviously if you're in the city, it's more expensive. And I would say that if you want people to be creating your strategy, managing multiple channels, like you're probably looking like, I don't know, 500 to, I don't know. It could be anything. Smaller towns, you could probably find people for way cheaper. I know that the going rate kind of in the city is like $1,000, $1,500, $2,000 a month, depending on how much content is required to be pushed out. But you can probably find people affordably in your area.
Yeah, it's just kind of based on what your budget is and what
Yeah.
what you're able to do.
Yeah, and you can find students to do stuff. Like, I mean, if you just need someone to post things or schedule them and post them, you can get like students to do that kind of stuff. But if you need more of a bigger strategic mind that is sort of creating the process and the posting, then you probably need someone who's more professional.
And finally, you know, saturation of home videos and people trying to keep busy seems to be overpowering social media during this pandemic. What would you suggest we do to beat out the TikTokers?
I would, hey, if you can't beat them, join them. I'm a big proponent during this time. Like, show the behind the scenes, like everyone working from home. Like, show what it's like to be a closed arts organization, what that looks like. Like, do some weird things of like your CEOs, like taking the laundry out of the hamper. I don't know. Like there's all kinds of really relatable, interesting things that you can be doing and sort of posting through this time. People really want to see like kind of the behind the scenes of how people are managing. So if it's like, I know the Calgary Philharmonic has done stuff with their performers, like where they're playing at home. And so they'll post little like Facebook lives of their cellos performing from their houses on Zoom, things like that. Like there's super, like take this opportunity to do things that are like really outside the box and sort of showcase your organization in a really interesting way. But yeah, make TikToks of like you tried to do a Zoom call with like kids running all over the back and screaming and making puzzles or whatever. Like people want to see that. It's relatable. Be vulnerable. Like get on Facebook and talk about how difficult it is to be closed and what that means for the future. And like really talk about this stuff, because you know what? Everyone's in it. And no one is thinking that anyone is going to be better off coming out of this than anybody else. So if you can be super vulnerable and authentic about the struggles that you're having right now, whether it's money or facility or staff or any of that kind of stuff, it's really compelling. And so don't shy away from that stuff. Like get out there and talk about it. And yeah, do weird TikToks, like whatever.
I think that's a perfect place to leave things for today. Yeah, it's just, I've learned about so many more cultural organizations since this has all been taking place,
Yeah.
because everybody's on social media, and I've learned about so many groups that way. So now's the time. Get out there and be present and be real, and we'll all come out on the other side together. So Alyssa, thank you for your time. That was an immense number of questions for you, but really a valuable presentation that we will share the recording with everyone after. Do you have any closing remarks you want to make?
No, I would just like to say thank you to everyone. I hope that this was helpful. And obviously, as Wendy said, you can contact me through the mentor portal. I'm happy to answer any other questions and help you out. But have a great afternoon, and thank you for taking the time to come hang out with me today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks to everyone for joining in today. There are several more webinars coming up in the first part of May. So if you aren't sure about those, do check in with your program managers, and we'll make sure you have all the information to sign up for the upcoming webinars. So meanwhile, thank you again, Alyssa. Thanks, Allison, our Alberta program manager, who's been in the background here with us, helping us out. And yeah, just everyone be well, and we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.